What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Form Check Friday. Now, for those of you who are just tuning in or maybe new to the channel, welcome. And this is the series where we take your user-submitted videos that have been emailed into formcheckfriday@gmail.com. Once again, that is formcheckfriday@gmail.com. And we put them up on this screen behind me, like so. And we take a look at the lifts. We try to offer you some tips and some suggestions in terms of how you can solve maybe some of the problems you're having with your lifts and how you can become better, more efficient lifters, and by doing so, lift more weight. Now we're going to start off with Daniel Ng, and Daniel submitted his video last week. We put it up and we asked for some user or viewer suggestions and ideas. Now we're going to go through some of those, and I'm going to offer my own critique of Daniel's deadlift, and then we'll start with that. So there were a few decent comments, I thought. Piece of Peace offered a bunch of different cues and ideas here. He said the hips should be a little lower, the shoulders are too far over the bar, could change the foot angle and bring knees back by leaning backwards. So I think in terms of where Daniel's at, I think this angle is a little bit deceiving. I think Daniel's actually pretty well in line over the bar. I could see him playing with a bit of a wider stance and maybe having some success with that. But I don't necessarily think that he's too far forward. I don't think that his hips need to be lower. I think more than not, everything looks pretty great here. He starts off maybe setting up. So if we're here, yes, okay, he's a little bit in front of the bar. But notice how he pulls in that last little bit. So from here to here, where he pulls in before he starts, I think he ends up pulling from a pretty damn good position. So overall, Daniel, I think things look pretty good. I think I would probably play with maybe a bit of a wider stance and see if that allows you to take a bit more advantage of some of the leverage benefits of sumo deadlifting. But other than that, I don't think you need to change much. I think you just need to spend some more time practicing, continue to learn the movement by performing repetition, and that's going to be about it. So best of luck with that, Daniel. I know you said you're just transitioning into sumo deadlifts, so hopefully that goes pretty damn well for you. All right, now our next one here is going to be from Gavin L. Now, Gavin says he recently started watching our channel, and he says it's already helped him in the bench and deadlift quite a bit, so he'd like to say thank you. You're very welcome, Daniel. Gavin, my bad. The issue he says he's having right now is in his squat. He says he feels extremely unstable in the right side of his lower body, specifically hip, ankle, foot. He says it might be a mobility or flexibility imbalance in his right hip compared to his left, but he doesn't have a clear understanding of it. He says he'd also appreciate any advice I have on any aspect of his other squat. He says his right rotator cuff is partially torn, so that might be why his shoulder looks a little funky. All right, well, Gavin, let us take a look at your squat here and we'll see what we can pick out. All right, so to start with, I just want to talk a little bit about symmetry. Now, I think that symmetry is a sort of arbitrary measure that a lot of people use to try to say that things are maybe good or bad in a lift. And we look for symmetry and we try to find symmetry. And in some cases, we even seek out symmetry to a fault. Now, in some cases, yes, if we have a weird twisting motion or you feel that, one side of the body, and this is going to be in air quotes, but isn't doing its job, there can be some routes that we can go down to try to become more efficient. But I think in a lot of cases, a lot of people would benefit from just accepting the fact that the human body was not designed or made or rarely ever comes out symmetrically. So to expect the bar to be perfectly symmetrical on our backs, to expect our body to move perfectly symmetrically, I think is a bit of a fault. So let's not get caught in that trap and look for things that maybe aren't there. Now, to me, your squat looks quite good. Now, in terms of your pauses, I think we're a little bit loose. I think you're just kind of relaxing in the bottom a little bit too much, and I'd like to see you stay a little bit more tense and a little more tight in the bottom position. In terms of the bar position, I mean, as always, I would probably recommend at least playing with, wow, that's a big line. All right, at least playing with a little bit of a lower bar position. Right now, this is very high bar. There's nothing inherently wrong with high bar, but I think in a lot of cases, people can lift usually a little bit more weight by going with a lower bar position, moving that bar a little bit further down so that the bar is going to be, and this is a great way to do that, resting here instead of on top of the traps. Now, that might look like a very small distinction, but we can see the sort of meat of the rear delt. Let's see if I can circle it properly. Right about there. and right about there. And that's where we would have that bar laying just on top of that instead of up above the traps like it is. Now, yes, it looks to me like you are perhaps a little bit asymmetrical, but like I said, that is the nature of the human body. In terms of the tension into the bottom, it looks like our pause is more of like a relax, and we're going just ass to grass and sort of relying on the very end range of motion. I would like to see a little bit more tension and intention in the bottom position of your squat in terms of maintaining tightness. Other than that, I don't think that there's a huge visible component to that sort of feeling of lack of flexibility or issue in your hip and right foot. It doesn't look like that issue is very prominent. So I think this might be a case of kind of overthinking things, getting a little bit too caught up in maybe some of the stuff you saw on the internet about how your big toe is slightly too internally rotated and you should spend 48 minutes warming up and rolling and crushing every muscle in your body with random implements that people are trying to sell you. Yeah, just squat. Your squat's pretty good. I wouldn't worry too much about it, Gavin. All right, our next one comes from Dave, and Dave's doing some bench press. So here's a set of 5 at RPE 7 from a few weeks back. He says his bench is by far his worst lift: 405 squat, 215 bench, 475 deadlift. He says he's wondering if we see any technique issues or if it's simply just a matter of him needing to get stronger in his upper body. So let us take a look at Dave's bench here. All right, Dave, what do we got going on, man? So as per usual, anybody who's tuned into this series for a period of time, we're going to watch that unrack. Now, unrack to me looks like we are protracting. So when Dave gets set, he gets his shoulders into a pretty good position. He's a little bit shrugged up though. So the two big things I would work on is pulling his shoulders together behind him and pulling his shoulders down more. Now, he might need to set up further up the bench this way to make the unrack a little easier with that type of setup, because what's going to happen is his shoulder's going to be down here. It's going to be further back. He might need to bring the bar down in the rack as well as shift his whole body up this way so he doesn't have to reach quite as far back. So I'm guessing that's about where he's going to unrack to. It's probably somewhere in here. And that's a bit of a long unrack. No. Okay. So that is more where you should be unracking to. I would also like to see you pull the bar out just a tiny bit further, and that's going to go along with getting those shoulders depressed more. Because as it stands right now, you got a pretty low touch point, right? And what we're looking for in the bar path is this back and up idea that we talk about a lot. What's happening here is just kind of that. Actually, the bar path is pretty good. Pretty good. The back and up motion of the bar is pretty damn good. But we can tell by what we can see here is his sort of shoulder is a little bit bunched up. And we can tell that his shoulder is elevated. What we're looking for is actually shoulder depression. And we actually just put out a video on this talking about unracking the bar a little bit differently, as well as pulling the bar out over your body further as a means of getting better scapular depression. So Dylan's going to put that link up in the video somewhere. So if you want to check that out, go ahead and click that. Other than that, like I said, the press itself looks pretty good. That last rep, we definitely got loose in that upper back. So we're starting to, again, suffer the consequences of being loose and not sort of retracted and depressed just enough. And that rep is very, very visible. We start to see the elbows kind of get, or having to chase the bar back, and the shoulders are getting very elevated there. So I think we need to work on a number of those things in terms of setting the shoulder blades to start off with. And hopefully that video helps illustrate some of the ways we can do that. All right, moving on. Our next one comes from Alex. And Alex G is doing some deadlifts. He says, one of our English fans here, shout outs to the UK. He says he's attached a video of him doing some sumo deadlifts for the first time. He's always deadlifted conventional, but felt like giving sumo a try. He says he likes the way sumo feels and definitely going to keep it up, but he thinks there are a few issues with his technique. He says his hips rise too early on pretty much every rep, which is a problem he also has when deadlifting conventional, and it gets worse in the second set, so he's not sure if he's pulling the slack out of the bar properly or at all. Any critique on his form and setup would be great. The video shows 2 sets, 140 for 4 and 145 for 4. His conventional max is 180, so they're both around 80% of that. All right, boom. All right, so first time sumo deadlifting, or one of the first time sumo deadlifting. Let's check it out. It says his hips rise a little early. Now, I think the reason the hips rise is because we're setting them a little bit too low to start off with. And this is a really common mistake a lot of people make in the sumo deadlift, is they assume that they need to set their hips very low. But what happens then is the knees get forced forward pretty far. So what I would do is I would focus more on bringing your knees back and keeping your hips low. So what that's going to do is it's going to allow us to get into a really decent upright position, as well as ideally create a lot of tension through the hamstrings, through the glutes, and through the lats. So if we can bring those knees back a little bit, it should help adjust these hips to just where they need to go. And honestly, where the hips start the pull from, that's probably a really good position for you. Because as we saw, the knees came back a little bit, the hips came up a little higher, and there we can get a little bit better tension off the floor. The pull itself actually looks quite good, Alex. It's just a matter of you're setting yourself too low, which is causing your hips to rise. So the hip rise isn't a bad thing. The hip rise is getting you to a position where you're having a leverage advantage on the bar, and you're able to kind of align it with your own center of gravity and get the thing moving. The issue is more so that we're setting ourselves too low to start with. So the hip rise is actually an advantage here. But what I would recommend is, because that hip rise is going to be inconsistent, when we start low and we start from a position where we're not super tight, that hip rise could be, it could change the hip height a few centimeters, it could change the hip height a few inches. And what's going to happen there is we're going to develop inconsistencies in the deadlift, and we're not going to be in control of our start position. And what we want is nice, repeatable, consistent technique. So let's start allowing the hips to start a little bit higher by trying to bring the knees back further relative to the barbell. Our next one comes from Matt, and Matt is doing some squats. So Matt says he's currently running a 6-week squat program, and he's about halfway through. So the video here is him squatting 330 for a set of 5. Overall, he's happy with the speed, depth, and his squat overall. It appears he has a slight asymmetry in the hips during the negative and positive portion of the hips. Perhaps you could take a look and critique the squat. So again, this is going to come back to a symmetry thing. And again, I think in some cases we're kind of chasing the wrong rabbit. And yeah, I mean, he sits a little more to the left, but does that inherently cause any issues? Does that inherently cause any sort of inefficiency? Does it inherently cause injuries? And the answer is no, it doesn't. There's nothing to prove or to say that those slight asymmetries can be the root of any real problem, or that there's something that need to be addressed. I think we have, as a culture, and especially as lifters, this sort of need to make things look really pretty. And we have this sort of dogmatic idea of what good technique looks like. And we need to realize that there are individual differences in our anatomies and in the ways that our bodies function, and we need to be okay with those. Now, in terms of the squat, it does look like when you hit the hole, we're getting really arched up. So I would like to see some better bracing patterns. I'd like to see you taking more time to set tension in your trunk and your upper back, so that when you get into the bottom, we're not having to reach like that. So I'd like to see the ribs pulled down a little harder. I'd like to see you tilting a little bit more. We can see as you initiate your squat on the descent, you're very much reaching your chest up high. You're looking straight out, which isn't a bad thing. But here, okay, we're packing the neck back really well. The upper back looks pretty decently tight. Depth is good, but I think we're getting into a really sort of arched pattern, and that's what's causing this really sort of aggressive sticking point. In a lot of cases, if we can get a little bit more braced, if we can get a little bit more of those ribs down and kind of like align the trunk a little bit better, we can be a bit smoother through that otherwise sticking point, that point where we would otherwise stick, I should say. So that would be the thing that I would work on, is trying to brace a little tighter. I would maybe move your grip out a little bit. It looks like you're really sort of jammed in there. And I think if you move your grip out just a tiny bit, and I'm talking like 1 or 2 fingers widths, you'll be able to get a little tighter in your upper back, because when you're wedged in like that, there isn't a lot of room for things to move or for you to pull yourself into tightness. Things are just jammed in. And this obviously isn't always the case, but in some cases, by going a little bit wider, we can feel a little more active. We can be a little bit more active in terms of how we're tightening the upper back, instead of just jamming things in there and hoping nothing moves. So those would be the things that I would look at. I would not be focused on that slight asymmetry. And lastly, we have Emil. Now, Emil's doing some bench press, and this is the portion of the episode where I'm going to let this play in the background. And I want everybody to tune in the comments and let us know what you think Emil could work on. We're going to start next episode with me critiquing Emil's bench, so don't worry, he's not getting stiffed on advice from me. He will be receiving my advice in the end, but for now, I want our viewers to tune in and start working on their ability to critique other people's lifts as a means to increase their own proficiency in critiquing their own lifts. So the idea here is that we all learn and grow and get better and develop together. I'm going to read Emil's email here as well. Emil? I'm going to call you Emil because that's how I think your name is pronounced. If it's wrong, I do apologize. Planning to compete next year in powerlifting. Have had shoulder issues for a long time, exactly the whole last year. Couldn't bench and only did rehab. Shoulder is way better now and I can bench, but always paranoid that I will injure myself again. Have slowly, over the course of a few months, widened my grip to max grip. Feels better than close grip. Any tips? Now, I think something that we should take into consideration here is that paranoia. You said you're paranoid to injure yourself again. And maybe some people have some comments or ideas about how we can sort of reframe even how we're thinking about the bench press. Perhaps there's some tips in there that our viewers can come up with in regards to the biopsychosocial model of pain and the interactions between the way that we think about our lifts and the way that we think about our movement and how that impacts potential to injure ourselves or to have pain experiences. Anyways, that's enough leading the jury, leading the witness there. But we'll leave you with that. I want to thank everybody for tuning in. If you're interested in getting your lifts looked at, go ahead and submit them to formcheckfriday@gmail.com. And hope everybody has a fantastic weekend. We'll see y'all soon. If you're one more last little thing, sorry. We do also do a live stream form check every Friday at 12 p.m. MST at twitch.tv/Calgary Barbell, as well as live on the YouTube. So if you guys are interested in checking that out, go ahead and tune in. We often do, or the whole purpose of it is to answer questions and to do live form checks. So if you're kind of waiting and hoping and praying to get your lift looked at, then you can tune in and we'll get to it right there and then in front of you, and we can even chat a little bit about it. So, all right, that's it for me. See y'all in the next one.